Like the other branches, the judiciary has fluctuated in size, power, and scope since the times of the Constitution, with the Supreme Court, its most exaggerated representative, changing based off of who was on the court and gaining power based by its leadership, similar to Congress and the White House. The first Chief Justices, such as John Jay, were pretty pensive. However, John Marshall, the fourth Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who was the Chief Justice for 34 years, changed American history through his actions. Coming to the bench and having one of the longest tenures of any Supreme Court Chief Justice, he managed to change the court through some of its most important rulings. The Marbury v. Madison 1803 decision established judicial review, where Marshall and his fellows on the court basically said that the Supreme Court had the right to review and decide if laws passed by Congress and signed by presidents were constitutional. Another huge ruling was Ogden v. Gibbons, which established Congress with the right to not only regulate interstate commerce, but asserted its ability to handle navigation. However, Marshall would be challenged by one of the most controversial and strong-willed figures in American history, the seventh president, Andrew Jackson. Elected by an overwhelming majority of the people, Jackson was seen as the people's president, a man of the people, a political juggernaut, but also as a tyrant and a king who wanted his will. When he tried to force Native American tribes such as the Cherokee out of their ancestral lands and force them to move to modern-day Oklahoma, the case went all the way to the Supreme Court, with the Cherokee demanding their freedoms. In another major ruling for the Marshall Court, the elder justice asserted that they did not have to move. However, Jackson, the old general, Old Hickory, insisted that if Marshall and his court had made their ruling, they should be able to enforce it. This wasn't the first time Jackson butted heads with people in his government, and the Supreme Court, along with other segments of the government, chafed at Jackson's superiority and influence. Eventually, the Cherokee were forced to move, and Marshall was not able to stop Jackson. Marshall also died in 1835 while Jackson was still president, and Jackson decided to put the court squarely in the Jacksonian Democratic side. Changing from the Federalists to the Democrats, a Jackson loyalist, Roger B. Taney, who had been his Treasury Secretary and Attorney General, became the Supreme Court Chief Justice, serving for 28 years in another remarkable and extremely influential court, which would make some of the most important rulings in American history, most notably the 1857 Dred Scott decision, in which a slave applied for freedom when his owner moved to a free state. The cause of abolition was growing, with men like Frederick Douglass sounding the call. And with compromising efforts in the United States Congress failing and presidents being relatively weak, and the continual demands of Northerners turning more and more towards the moral injustices of slavery, Taney believed he could solve the issue once and forever by striking a blow against the Northerners and for his beloved South. Although his decision would eventually help lead to the Civil War, it is one of the most controversial and reprehensible decisions by the court, which said that Dred Scott was not a citizen, neither was any other slave, so they could never appeal for their freedom. This divided the nation and helped lead to the Civil War, and Taney served out the rest of his time watching the Civil War unfold as Chief Justice until his death in 1864.